Hi everybody, it's Monday again, so it's another podcast from me. And this time we are still talking about minimizing or decluttering your possessions. However, I would like to tackle it from a specific angle, and I'd like to talk about science. Oh, science, right? And specifically behavioral science. And I want to talk about it because this is an element that is kind of implicitly present in all of the advice I've seen regarding decluttering or minimizing, but is scarcely really called out as such, as a science. And I think that's important because behavioral science allows us to understand a little bit more how our brain works, and it gives us the insight into why is it so difficult to part with possessions, why do we cling so much, and why don't we want to let go some items that might really be completely useless. So what I want to do is to briefly cover three specific cognitive biases that are actually clouding our judgment when it comes to the value of certain items. And when I'm speaking of cognitive biases, I mean perception biases that are actually making us see things not fully rationally, but through kind of a skewed lens of our mind. You don't need to feel bad about it. You don't need to feel like that the inability to see things objectively is making you a lesser person, because all of us, all humans, are actually victims of cognitive biases. It's totally normal. So getting right into the three cognitive biases I believe are relevant when it comes to decluttering. The first one I want to talk about is called endowment effect. And the endowment effect is described in a fairly famous book of Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. And this is not the only cognitive bias that Kahneman writes about in there. You may want to check out the book and read about a plethora of these biases. But the endowment effect specifically is interesting for us because what it is essentially a notion that we tend to attribute higher value to the items we already own compared to the items we don't. So once you buy the item, or once you get it as a gift, once you perceive it as your own, it has greater value for you in your mind. You are just not willing to part with it for the same price that a person who is totally indifferent to this item would be willing to pay. And it sounds mad, but there are experiments and that proved that this is the case. And it is very often blocking us from getting rid of items that we've been owning for a long time. It could be a piece of clothing that you owned for quite some time. You have some fond memories connected to this item, and you just don't want to let it go. And if you were to let it go, you want to sell it, and you want to sell it for much more than what it is worth. My mom has this issue with selling the gramophone records, which she was collecting for the majority of her life. And these are not some vintage hipster cool vinyls, but pop music from communist Czechoslovakia mostly, and its market value is minimal. However, she felt that these items are more valuable and should be more valuable on the open market than they already were. The way to deal with it is just ask an honest opinion of a friend, or Google an honest opinion of eBay or Craigslist to see how much something is really worth and get a reality check. The second cognitive bias I want to talk about is called Suncoast fallacy. Suncoast fallacy means that we are very, very unwilling to get rid of items into which we have invested our time or money in the past, regardless of the residual value of this item right now. So what this might mean is if I bought an item in the past, I spent a lot of money, maybe I spent a lot on customization. This item might be completely useless right now, but I still don't want to sell it because I still feel the pain of the cost that I already invested into this item. And in behavioral science, this is again demonstrated in a bunch of experiments when people are, for example, willing to travel far away from their home to do a shopping in a store where they can utilize their purchase voucher, for example, even though the nominal value of this purchase voucher is ridiculously low. Just because they just feel the voucher already exists, they already have this item, they already have this expense, and it would be such a waste to not to use it, to let it go to waste, literally, I guess. So what's the help in here? If you have an item like this, something you invested into, the question you should ask yourself to see what it's really worth is, how much would I be willing to pay for this item right now if I was to buy it new? Would I be willing to pay as much as I'm thinking this is worth? And if you need a reality check, it might be good to ask a friend again, even here. Because this is often clouding our judgment. And the sunk cost fallacy is also an effect that makes us invest our time and effort into projects that are doomed to fail just because we spent too much time with them already. I have it with books. Books I bought, books I maybe read halfway through, never finished. I feel like I want to keep them because someday I may want to finish them. The last effect I want to mention, last perception bias here would be a funny one, and it's called Ikea effect. And the Ikea effect basically means that we tend to overvalue the items that we put together ourselves. So for Ikea, of course. So whatever you assembled, or you put your work into that, or you customized it, may have greater value for you than the quote-unquote normal items. And to end this, the full confession is I'm suffering with this right now, with something I don't want to let go. I have a bunch of printouts of articles on political philosophy, which is something I was very interested in, 15 years ago, probably more than that, almost 20 years ago, I guess. And not only I printed them, so that would be, endowment effect. I printed them, I have them for a long time. But there is Ikea effect also, because I used color highlighters, multiple colors actually, and I highlighted and annotated them. So now they are my personal comments. I mixed my labor, my effort with these articles. And there is the sunk cost fallacy as well, because I studied political philosophy, and I thought that one day I may get a PhD in that, which I never did, due to internal and external factors. I'd say I was lazy to finish, and but I still have those. I still have those articles for way over 15 years now, So the Ikea effect is stopping me from getting rid of them because I feel I cannot replace them. I made these highlights and they are unique. So how can you work with that, and how will I work with that in the upcoming days? To make it easier on myself, I'm just gonna scan them into PDFs. So I have this kind of safety net to feel I'm still keeping it. And I'm gonna toss the hard copies, because if you want to build space, to build room for your new self, for your new life, and build the possibility to do something extraordinary, part of it is letting go of what is not serving anymore. And I want to be honest with myself. I'm never gonna use those articles the way I intended to 15 years ago, and I invite you to do the same. Be honest with yourself, assess your possessions as objectively as you can, and if you can, ask help. Check eBay, check Craigslist, check with your friends, what is the item really worth, and act accordingly. That's all I have for today. Thanks again, and I guess I'll see you next time, which is a figure of speech because I'm not gonna see you, of course, but you may see me on YouTube, or if you're just listening to this, you can just hear from me, I guess. Okay, this is it. Cut.